Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I never thought I'd be saying this out loud. It's personal, it's from the heart, and it's about something I used to laugh about, deny, or bury so deep I thought it would disappear. It's about Jimin. For a long time, I believed I understood everything there was to know about connection, about trust, about love and friendship. But I was wrong. I was wrong about Jimin, about what he meant to me, and about what I thought I needed to protect myself from. What changed my mind wasn't something dramatic or cinematic. It was something quiet, something I almost ignored. And yet, it changed everything. When I look back now, I realize how easy it is to take people for granted when you think they'll always be there. For years, Jimin was just constant, reliable, the one who smiled when I was tired, who noticed when I didn't speak. He'd sit next to me in silence and somehow make it feel like the world wasn't so loud anymore. But I didn't always see it. I was too busy chasing perfection, too caught up in work, in appearances, in proving I was strong enough to stand on my own. I confused independence with isolation. I thought vulnerability was weakness. And Jimin, he was the opposite of that. Open-hearted, emotional, unafraid to care. At the time, I didn't understand how powerful that was. I remember once, during a long rehearsal night, I snapped at him. He had been teasing me about something small, something meaningless. I told him to stop, to mind his own business. He laughed at first, thinking I was joking, but when he saw the look on my face, he just nodded quietly and stepped back. I could feel the silence in the room after that thick, heavy. Taehyung tried to lighten the mood. Hosok smiled awkwardly, but something inside me shifted that night. I didn't know it yet, but I had hurt someone who only ever tried to understand me. Over the next few weeks, Jimin kept his distance. He still smiled, still spoke gently, but the easy warmth between us had cooled. I told myself it was fine that I preferred it this way. No distractions. Just work. But when he wasn't around, the practice room felt colder. When I looked up and didn't see him laughing with Taehyung or humming softly near the window, something inside me ached. Still, I refused to name it. Pride is a powerful thing. You tell yourself you're strong because you don't need anyone, until the day you realize you do. That realization came quietly. It wasn't during a performance or an argument. It was during a hospital visit. Not mine, his. Jimin had been overworking himself again, pushing too hard the way he always does when he's trying to prove he's okay. I went to see him late at night after everyone else had gone. The room was dim, the city lights flickering through the window, and there he was, sleeping lightly, oxygen tube resting against his face. He looked peaceful, but fragile. It scared me. I remember standing there, unable to move, my chest tightening with something I couldn't define. Namjoon had told me earlier that day, "You should visit him. He doesn't say it, but he misses you." I didn't want to believe that. But standing there, watching him breathe, I realized how much I had missed him too. That empty feeling I'd been carrying for months, it wasn't from exhaustion or burnout. It was from the space he used to fill. I sat down next to his bed and noticed a small notebook on the table. His handwriting was messy, like always. The page was open to a half-written sentence. You never know when people will understand how much they meant to you until they don't say anything anymore. I don't know if he meant it for me, but it felt like he did. I wanted to wake him up, to say something, to apologize for every moment. I let my silence speak louder than my heart, but I didn't. Instead, I just sat there and whispered his name once, softly. He stirred slightly, and for a second, I thought he heard me. That night, something changed inside me. I drove home with music off, my thoughts louder than ever. I kept seeing his face, remembering every time he looked at me with kindness I didn't deserve. I thought about how often he was there when I didn't even notice. During the early days of our debut, when I was shy and unsure, he would nudge me on stage, whisper, You've got this. When I doubted myself during recordings, he'd be there afterward with that quiet smile saying, don't overthink it. You're amazing. I had mistaken all of that for simplicity, for softness that I didn't think I needed. But that night, I understood that Jimin's strength wasn't loud. It was steady. It was love that didn't demand anything back. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to see him again. When I visited, he was awake this time. He smiled when he saw me, that same gentle smile I had missed. You came, he said simply. I nodded, unable to speak. I wanted to apologize, but the words felt too small. He just looked at me for a long moment, then said, you don't have to say anything. I know. There was something in his tone that broke me. That grace, his ability to forgive before I even asked for it, was the exact opposite of what I used to believe strength was. In that moment, I realized how wrong I had been. About him, about myself, about what truly matters. When Jimin recovered and came back to practice, the air between us felt lighter. We didn't talk about that night. We didn't need to. There was an unspoken understanding now. I started to notice the small things again, the way he laughed with Taehyung until they cried, how Yoongi watched over everyone quietly from the corner, how Namjoon always seemed to know when someone needed encouragement, how Seokjin made jokes to ease tension, how Hoseok's laughter filled the room with life. I realized these weren't just people I worked with, they were family. They had carried me even when I thought I was standing alone. But among them all, Jimin's presence was different. He became the reminder of everything real, the heartbeat behind all the noise. Sometimes, when we were on stage and the lights hit us, I'd glance at him. He'd always be smiling, singing with his whole soul. And I'd feel that same quiet peace I felt in that hospital room. It was like God, or whatever you want to call it, the force that connects us was whispering, see, this is what love looks like. People often think our lives are perfect, that fame fills every space of emptiness. But the truth is, success can be the loudest kind of loneliness. You build walls to protect yourself from the pressure, from criticism, from vulnerability, but those same walls keep out the people who care. Jimin broke through those walls, not with force, but with kindness. And now, I can't imagine my life without that light. I used to believe love had to be earned through achievement, through perfection, through proving I was enough. But Jimin taught me that love is given, not earned. It's presence, not performance. It's forgiveness, not pride. I think about that often now. When I'm tired, when I'm questioning who I am outside of the stage, when the world feels heavy, I remember his words. You don't have to say anything. I know. That's what real understanding sounds like. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic speeches. It's about being seen, truly seen, and still being accepted. I was wrong about Jimin. I was wrong to think I had to guard my heart to protect it. I was wrong to mistake vulnerability for weakness. Because what I learned, what he showed me, is that love, in its purest form, is the strongest thing we can experience. And when you find someone who reflects that back to you, someone who sees the best in you, even when you can't see it yourself, you hold on to them. Not out of fear, but out of gratitude. Sometimes I still catch myself retreating into silence. The old habit's hard to break. But then I think of him, of the way he lives, with his heart open, even when it hurts. And I remind myself that it's okay to feel. It's okay to need people. It's okay to love loudly. If there's anything I've learned, it's that the people who truly change us rarely do it with grand speeches. They do it through quiet presence, through patience, through unwavering care. That's what Jimin gave me. That's what all the members gave me. And now, when I look around on stage, in the studio, in those late night conversations that stretch till dawn, I don't just see bandmates. I see grace. I see the reflection of everything I once doubted, everything I now believe in. So if you're listening to this, wherever you are, and you've been too afraid to reach out, too afraid to forgive, too afraid to let yourself love again, don't wait. Sometimes the person you're pushing away is the one who was sent to show you who you really are. I was wrong about Jimin, but now I know what love looks like, and I'll never take it for granted again. Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. There's something strange that happens when you begin to see your mistakes in slow motion, not as sudden bursts of regret, but as quiet realizations that sneak up on you when life finally slows down. That's how it happened for me with Jimin. I didn't wake up one day and think I was wrong. It was a slow unraveling of pride, an awakening that came through moments that felt ordinary until they weren't. It started after that night in the hospital. I thought I had moved on, that visiting him was closure, that we had both silently agreed to leave the past behind. But what I didn't realize then was that some lessons don't end with a single apology. They echo, they follow you into the smallest corners of your day. Every time I laughed with Taehyung, every time Namjoon spoke about trust during our meetings, every time Hoseok smiled at me and said, "You good, man?" I felt the weight of what I hadn't said to Jimin. Jimin didn't hold it against me. That's the thing about him. He doesn't carry bitterness, he carries grace. He still laughed with me, still reached out during rehearsals, still made sure I was eating, but beneath that softness, there was something new, a distance. He was learning to protect his own heart too, and I could feel it. And for the first time, it hurt, because now I knew what I had lost. The irony is that the very thing I used to find frustrating about Jimin, his sensitivity, his emotion, his openness, was the thing I began to miss the most. I used to think being strong meant keeping everything inside, showing no weakness. Jimin never did that. He wore his heart openly, and I used to think it made him fragile. But watching him heal, watching him show up every day with quiet resilience, I realized that he was the strongest among us. One day, during a break in rehearsal, I found him sitting alone on the floor, back against the mirror, scrolling through his phone. His head was down, and I could tell he was somewhere else in his thoughts. I sat beside him, unsure what to say. After a long silence, I asked, "You good?" He smiled a little, that faint, tired smile he does when he's trying to hide something. "Yeah," he said softly. "Just thinking." I didn't push, but that moment lingered in my head all day. Because the truth was, I wasn't good either. I had been feeling off for weeks, restless, guilty, confused. Every time we performed together, every time I heard his voice harmonizing with mine, I felt both comforted and haunted. It's strange how the same person can be the reminder of your peace and your regret. Later that night, after everyone left the studio, I stayed behind. I played one of our older songs, something from the days when everything felt simple. I listened to Jimin's voice in the chorus, warm, pure, unguarded, and I broke. For the first time in years, I cried alone in that empty room. Not out of sadness, exactly, but out of recognition. Recognition of how deeply I had needed him all along. How blind I had been to the quiet ways he loved. You see, Jimin never tried to fix people with words. He fixed you by being there, by listening, by noticing, by caring, even when you didn't deserve it. That's a kind of love that doesn't make noise. It's the kind that lives in the background until the silence becomes unbearable and you realize it's been your foundation all along. A few days later, I was talking with Namjoon in the studio. He has this way of making you confront things you'd rather avoid. He says something like, "You know, sometimes people who give the most love are the ones who need it the most." I didn't respond, but it hit me hard, because that was Jimin. He gave and gave and gave, but how often did I ever stop to ask what he needed? That question haunted me for weeks. I started paying attention more. The way Jimin smiled a little less when he thought no one was looking. The way he brushed off compliments too quickly. The way he was always the first to comfort others, but rarely let anyone comfort him. It made me wonder how many times he had been there for me while quietly breaking himself to pieces. There was one night, after a concert, when the rest of the members had gone back to the hotel, and I found him on the rooftop alone. It was windy, the city lights stretching endlessly beneath us. He was just standing there, hands in his pockets, staring out at nothing. "You okay?" I asked. The same question I'd asked before. This time he didn't pretend. "I don't know," he said. His voice was barely audible over the wind. Something in me wanted to protect that honesty, to not let it disappear under small talk or jokes. I stepped closer. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" He looked at me, and for a moment, the walls between us dissolved. "Yeah," he said, and gave a small nod. "I know." And then he smiled again, that heartbreaking kind of smile, the one that hides more than it shows. We stood there in silence, and I realized that sometimes love isn't about saying the perfect thing. It's about being present when words aren't enough. That night, I didn't try to fix him. I just stood there beside him, letting the wind fill the spaces between us. And I think maybe for both of us, that was enough. After that, I started noticing how all the members, in their own ways, carried pieces of that same quiet strength. Namjoon with his wisdom, Yoongi with his stillness, Hoseok with his light, Seokjin with his humor, Taehyung with his warmth. We were all so different, yet somehow we completed each other. And Jimin, he was the heart, the one who felt everything, who connected us without even trying. The more I understood that, the more I began to change. I started showing up differently. I began to say thank you more, to listen more, to put my phone down during meals, to laugh even when I didn't feel like it. Small things, but they mattered. Because love isn't built through big moments. It's built through consistency. It's built through showing up. One evening, I got a text from Jimin. It was simple. "You doing okay lately?" But it hit me harder than I expected. Because he had every reason to stop caring. Every reason to keep his distance. And yet, there he was. Still reaching out. Still being himself. I stared at that message for a long time before replying, "Yeah, I'm doing better now. Thanks to you." I never told him exactly what that meant, but I think he knew. Because Jimin has always known how to read silence better than words. That's the thing about realizing you were wrong about someone. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with humility. It comes with quiet moments of awareness when you finally see the truth that was in front of you all along. And the truth is, Jimin never changed. I did. I had to lose my certainty, my pride, my blindness to see him for who he truly was. Not just as a friend, not just as a bandmate, but as one of the greatest teachers of love I've ever known. Now, when I look back on everything, the tours, the laughter, the fights, the long nights of exhaustion, I don't think about the fame or the records. I think about moments like that rooftop, the silence, the honesty, the understanding that didn't need words. That's where love lives. That's where life makes sense. So if you've got someone like that in your life, someone who shows up for you quietly, who loves you without needing to be seen, don't wait too long to tell them what they mean to you. Because sometimes the people who save us never realize they've done it. And if you're lucky enough to have a Jimin in your life, hold on, cherish them. Because one day you'll look back and realize that they were the reason you learned how to love at all. Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. There's something I've learned about time. It doesn't heal what you ignore. It waits. It waits until you're ready to face what's been quietly shaping you from the inside. That's what happened with me and Jimin. For the longest time, I thought the chapter between us had closed, that the air was clear. But time has this strange way of revealing what you tried to hide. And one night, under the soft hum of studio lights, I realized that my silence had become its own kind of wound. It started with a song. We were recording a new track, one that Namjoon had written about gratitude and loss. The lyrics were raw, personal, and Jimin's voice carried them like prayer. When he sang, "I didn't know what I had until I lost it," I froze. The words weren't mine, but they felt like they were written straight from my soul. I could barely focus on my part after that. Each note I sang felt heavy with memories I hadn't processed, memories of laughter, tension, distance, and all the things I never said. Later, when everyone else left, I stayed behind. The studio was dim, the sound of Jimin's voice still echoing in my head. I replayed the track over and over, staring at the empty chair he had been sitting in earlier. The same chair where he had once sat years ago, laughing so hard at a joke Taehyung made that he spilled water all over the soundboard. I smiled at the memory, but it faded quickly into guilt, because back then I didn't realize how much those moments mattered. How sacred they were. Sometimes I think about how strange it is that you can share 1,000 moments with someone and not truly see them until they're gone, or until they pull away far enough for you to notice the space they leave behind. That's what Jimin's distance did to me. It showed me who I had been when I thought I was right. And it wasn't pretty. I had been cold, proud, distant. I had mistaken control for maturity. I had confused silence for strength. Yoongi once told me something during a late night talk. You don't really understand people until you've seen how they love you when you failed them. I didn't get it at the time, but Jimin proved it true. Even when I had been distant, when I had hurt him, when I had made him question his place beside me, he still showed up. He still looked out for me, still cheered for me in interviews, still smiled at me like nothing had broken. That kind of love doesn't make sense in a world obsessed with fairness. It's grace, and it changes you. A few days after that recording session, I ran into him on the balcony of the company building. It was early morning, before sunrise, and he was standing there with a cup of coffee, watching the sky lighten. The city was still asleep, and for a moment, it felt like the world had paused just for us. Couldn't sleep? I asked. He shook his head. Just needed some air. His voice was quiet, almost fragile. We stood there for a while without speaking. The silence was different now, not tense, but full. Finally, I said, "That song, your voice, it hit me hard." He turned to look at me, eyebrows raised just slightly, waiting. I swallowed, trying to find the words that had been sitting heavy in my chest. I've been thinking a lot lately about us, about the things I never said. He didn't say anything, just kept watching me. And then I said it, the thing I had been too afraid to admit. I was wrong. The words came out rough, but honest. I was wrong about you, about how much you meant. I thought I had to keep my distance to stay focused, to stay strong. But I just ended up pushing away the person who made me stronger without even trying. He didn't respond right away. He just took a slow sip of his coffee, eyes drifting back toward the horizon. And then softly he said, "I know." That's all he said. But in that single moment, I felt something lift off my chest. He didn't need an explanation. He didn't need an apology wrapped in grand gestures. He already understood. That's the thing about Jimin, he always understands, even when you don't deserve it. The sun started to rise, washing everything in gold. The air was cold, but I felt warm inside for the first time in months. We didn't say anything else. We just stood there, watching the sky turn brighter. It felt like a new beginning, though neither of us said the words out loud. That morning changed something in me. After that, I started noticing the world differently. It's strange when your heart begins to heal. Even the smallest things feel sacred. The laughter during group meals, Hoseok's spontaneous dance in the hallway, Seokjin's terrible puns that make everyone groan, Taehyung's deep, thoughtful questions that turn into 3-hour conversations, Namjoon's quiet advice when you least expect it, Yoongi's calm presence in the background, it all felt deeper, fuller. These weren't just bandmates anymore. They were pieces of the same soul that held me together. And at the center of it all was Jimin. Not because he tried to be, but because that's just who he is. The quiet heartbeat that keeps everyone connected. Sometimes I'd catch him looking around the room during practice, smiling at everyone like he was memorizing the moment. And I'd think, that's what love looks like. Not the dramatic kind. Not the movie kind. But the real kind, the kind that notices, that endures, that forgives. I started journaling again around that time. I hadn't done it in years. One night, I wrote, "Maybe love isn't something you find. Maybe it's something you remember after you forget." I didn't mean romantic love. I meant the kind of love that shapes you. The kind that shows up in friendship, in brotherhood, in the way someone keeps believing in you when you've stopped believing in yourself. There's something holy about that kind of connection. It's what keeps you human in a world that wants you to be perfect. And Jimin taught me that perfection means nothing if your heart is closed. Months later, during a concert in Seoul, something happened that I'll never forget. During the encore, we were singing one of our older songs, one that talks about never walking alone. As we moved to the center of the stage, Jimin reached out his hand to me. It was spontaneous, unplanned. But I took it, the lights were blinding, the crowd was roaring, and yet for a few seconds, all I could see was him smiling at me, the same smile that had forgiven me long before I earned it. After this show, when we were backstage catching our breath, he leaned over and said quietly, "Feels like old times, huh?" I nodded, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel that hollow ache anymore. I felt peace, real peace. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how everything had come full circle. How forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it redeems it. How being wrong doesn't define you, it refines you. And how the people who love you through your worst moments are the ones who show you what grace truly means. I used to think success was about never failing. Now I know it's about learning how to love better after you do. If you're listening to this and there's someone you've misunderstood, someone you pushed away, someone who once made your world brighter, don't let pride steal more time from you. Reach out. Say what you need to say. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Because sometimes the sunrise you've been waiting for only happens when you finally let yourself forgive. That's what I learned from Jimin. That love doesn't fade when you fail, it deepens when you let it. And that the people who remind you what it means to be human are the ones worth holding on to, no matter how long it takes to realize it. Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below. I've been thinking a lot about how we change how the people we meet, the moments we almost lose, and the memories we try to forget end up shaping who we become. For a long time, I believed change had to be visible. A new song, a new look, a new goal. But the kind of change that lasts, the one that transforms you from the inside, usually begins with something small. A quiet moment, a look you can't forget, or someone who shows you love in a way you didn't yet understand. For me, that someone was Jimin. After that morning on the balcony, something in me began to shift. It wasn't dramatic, it was subtle, like sunlight filtering through a window after a long night. I started to see Jimin differently, not as someone fragile or soft, but as someone whose strength came from love itself. And that realization began to affect how I treated everyone around me. I started showing up with more presence, not just as an artist, but as a human being. We were preparing for a world tour at the time, and things were intense. Late rehearsals, endless interviews, sleepless nights. Everyone was exhausted, but Jimin kept showing up with this quiet energy, checking on everyone, laughing with Hoseok, helping Taehyung with choreography, handing Namjoon water after long meetings. He carried this invisible grace, like no matter how heavy things got, he'd still choose kindness. I used to see that as naive. Now, I saw it as the bravest thing in the world. One night after rehearsal, I was the last one in the room. Yoongi came in to grab his bag. He looked at me and said, "You've changed." I didn't know what he meant, so I asked, "How?" He shrugged. "You listen more now." That stayed with me. Because maybe growth isn't about speaking louder, it's about listening deep. Jimin taught me that too. The next day, during a break, he sat next to me on the floor, sipping his coffee. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his tone curious. "Not judgmental." "Yeah," I replied, smiling faintly. "Just thinking." He nodded, like he understood everything I didn't say. "Thinking's good," he said softly. "Just don't overthink. Sometimes the heart knows what the mind can't explain." That line hit me harder than I expected. Because for so long, I had been living from my head, calculating, analyzing, controlling. I forgot what it meant to live from the heart. Jimin never did. He always led with feeling, and I used to think that made him too emotional. But now, I saw it was the reason he connected so deeply with people. He wasn't afraid to feel. As the tour began, I started to notice how every city changed us a little. New crowds, new energy, but the same brotherhood binding us together. Some nights were harder than others. There were days when I felt the pressure, when the exhaustion crept into my bones. During one of those nights in Chicago, I remember standing backstage before our encore, staring at the floor, my heart racing with anxiety. I didn't know why I had done this 1,000 times before, but that night, it felt different, heavier. Then, Jimin came over and touched my shoulder. "Hey," he said. I looked up. He smiled, not asking what was wrong, just being there. That's all it took. Somehow, his presence grounded me. "Let's just have fun," he whispered before running back on stage. And when I followed him out there, the noise of the crowd, the lights, the chaos, it all faded. All I could see was him dancing, free and alive, reminding me what this was all for. That moment brought me back to myself. Sometimes I think people underestimate how much we hold for each other in BTS, how much love passes silently between us. It's not always spoken. It's in the look Taehyung gives you before a high note, in the way Hoseok pats your back after a show, in the way Yoongi leaves a note that just says, "Rest well." It's in Seokjin's laughter echoing through a tired room. It's in Namjoon's way of saying, "You're doing enough." But Jimin, he carries everyone's emotions like a mirror. You see your reflection in how he treats you. He feels what you can't say out loud. One evening during our downtime in Japan, I went for a walk alone. The city was glowing, quiet, almost dreamlike. I passed a small cafe, and through the window, I saw Jimin sitting with a book, earbuds in, smiling faintly. I didn't go inside. I just stood there for a minute, watching him through the glass. And in that moment, something clicked. It wasn't romantic, it was spiritual. I realized that sometimes God or whatever force you believe in places certain people in your life not to complete you, but to awaken you. Jimin was that for me. He didn't change me by telling me how to live. He changed me by showing me how to love better. That night, I wrote in my journal again. Kindness is a language only the heart understands. Jimin speaks it fluently. During the next leg of the tour, we flew to London. It was raining the day we arrived, the sky gray and heavy. We had a day off before the show, and I spent most of it thinking about how far we'd all come. From those tiny practice rooms in Seoul to stadiums filled with thousands of people. Yet despite all the noise, the most meaningful moments were always the quiet ones. The ones between songs, between laughter, between breaths, the moments where we just were. That evening, we gathered in one hotel room. Me, Jimin, Taehyung, Namjoon, Hoseok, Yoongi, and Seokjin eating takeout, laughing, telling stories. At one point, Jimin turned to me and said, "Remember when you used to stay up all night practicing by yourself?" I nodded, a little embarrassed. "You never let anyone help," he said, smiling. "You always wanted to do everything alone." I chuckled, remembering how stubborn I used to be. "Yeah," I said, "I thought that made me stronger." He looked at me for a moment, eyes soft. "And now?" I took a breath. "Now I think strength means letting people in." He smiled again, that quiet, approving smile that feels like sunlight after rain. "Yeah," he said, "that's what I've been trying to tell you for years." Everyone laughed, but my chest felt warm, because I knew it wasn't a joke. It was truth. The kind you don't learn from success or applause, you learn it from love. That night, after everyone left, I sat by the window and looked out at the London lights reflecting off the wet streets. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was chasing something. I felt still, complete, not because everything was perfect, but because I finally understood what mattered. It wasn't the awards, the headlines, or even the dream itself. It was the people who helped me become who I am. The ones who believed when I doubted, who forgave when I failed, who loved me through my silence. Jimin was one of those people. He reminded me that no matter how far we go, no matter how loud the world becomes, we still need hearts that whisper, "You're not alone." And maybe that's what all of this has been about. Not fame, not success, not legacy, but learning to see the divine in ordinary moments, the sacred in friendship, the love and forgiveness. I used to think I was alone in this world, building something by myself. But now I know the truth. I've never been alone for a single second, because real love doesn't leave, it transforms you. It lingers in every song, every memory, every heartbeat that keeps you going when the lights fade. And every time I see Jimin smile, I'm reminded that sometimes the greatest miracle isn't what you achieve, it's who you become, because someone loved you enough to stay. You said 5. ChatGPT said, "Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below." I've spent so much of my life running toward success, toward perfection, toward this invisible finish line that never really existed. For years, I thought if I worked hard enough, sang perfectly enough, pushed myself far enough, I'd finally feel fulfilled. But there's this truth that I ignored for too long. You can't outrun what your heart refuses to forget. And no matter how many stages I performed on, or how many lights flashed in my face, there was always one thing quietly following me, the memory of Jimin. Not just a memory of him as my friend or teammate, but the way he taught me something I didn't know I needed to learn: how to stop fighting myself. After that night in London, something inside me softened. I started to understand that healing isn't about forgetting the pain, it's about facing it without letting it define you. Jimin once said to me during one of those late night talks we used to have, "You don't always have to be okay to be strong." I didn't fully get it at the time. I was still stuck in that mindset where showing emotion felt like losing control. But over the next few months, those words kept echoing in my head, especially during the quiet moments in airplanes between cities, in hotel rooms after shows, in those rare seconds before the lights went out and the noise disappeared. One night in New York, we had just finished performing at Madison Square Garden. It was one of those surreal moments, tens of thousands of people, the sound of their voices still ringing in my ears. Everyone was celebrating backstage, laughing, eating, taking pictures. But I slipped away for a bit, walked out into the hallway, and leaned against the wall, just breathing. I don't know why, but I felt this heaviness, this strange mix of joy and sadness at once. Maybe because for all the noise and love around me, I suddenly missed silence, not the empty kind, but the kind that feels like home. Jimin found me there. He didn't say anything at first. He just walked over, stood beside me, and looked down the hallway like he was seeing something only he could see. Then he said, "You okay?" I nodded, even though I wasn't. He knew it. He didn't press. He never does. He just stood there next to me for a while, then quietly said, "You know, sometimes I get scared too. When everything gets so big, I start wondering if I'll ever feel small again." I turned to look at him, confused. "Small?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, small enough to feel wonder, to be amazed again, to remember why we started." That line hit me like lightning, because I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped feeling amazed. The dream that used to fill me with passion had become a routine. And in trying to prove I could handle it all, I forgot how to simply feel it all. The next day, I watched Jimin more closely. Not just how he sang or danced, but how he moved through the world. The way he greeted every staff member, the way he bowed to fans, the way he smiled even when he was clearly tired. It wasn't fake, it was presence. He wasn't performing kindness, he was kindness. And I began to see what true strength looks like. Not in control, not in perfection, but in presence. Later that week, Namjoon gathered us for one of his team talks. He has this way of grounding everyone, pulling us back to the why. He said, "We've achieved a lot, but the only thing that will keep us here is love. Not fame, not skill, not fear, love. I remember glancing at Jimin when he said that. He smiled back like he already knew, because that's how he's always lived, leading with love, not ego. Something in me broke open after that. I started to feel things again, gratitude, empathy, even pain, but in a way that made me more alive. And I realized that's what Jimin had been trying to show me all along. That real strength isn't about suppressing your emotions. It's about allowing them to shape you without consuming you. There was this moment during the tour when everything just stopped. We were flying back to Korea after months on the road. Everyone was asleep except me and Jimin. The cabin lights were dim, the world outside, just a sea of clouds. He was sitting by the window, watching the sunrise. I sat next to him quietly for a while before saying, "Do you ever wonder what people see when they look at us?" He chuckled softly. Probably two guys who don't get enough sleep. We both laughed, and for a second, it felt like we were kids again. But then he turned serious. "I think they see what they need to see," he said. "But what matters is what we see. Do we see each other? Do we see ourselves?" That question sat with me for the rest of the flight. Did I really see the people who had walked this journey with me? The brothers who had carried me through the hardest nights? Or was I too lost in my own head to notice their quiet sacrifices? When we landed, I decided to change that. I started reaching out more, not just to Jimin, but to everyone. I told Hoseok how much his laughter meant to me. Told Taehyung that his honesty reminded me to stay real. Told Namjoon that his leadership kept me steady. Told Yoongi that his silence was often the loudest support. Told Seokjin that his humor kept us human. It felt strange at first, being that open. But the more I did it, the more alive I felt. Jimin noticed. One evening, after a long practice, he looked at me and said, "You've been different lately." I smiled. "You started it," I told him. He tilted his head, pretending not to understand. "What do you mean?" I shrugged. "You taught me how to see again." He didn't respond right away. Just looked down with a shy smile, then whispered, "We're all still learning." And he was right. We are. Every day, I learn a little more about what love really means. It's not about dramatic moments or grand gestures. It's about showing up when it's inconvenient, about forgiving when you could walk away, about choosing softness even when the world tells you to be hard. I used to think love was supposed to make life easier, but now I know real love makes you honest. It holds up a mirror and shows you who you really are, flaws and all. And when you finally see yourself clearly, you can start to love others better too. There's this saying I came across recently. You don't find peace by avoiding life. You find it by embracing everything it brings. That's what Jimin taught me without ever saying it. That peace isn't a destination, it's a way of being. It's how you move through pain without closing your heart. Now, whenever I step on stage, I try to carry that truth with me. I don't perform for perfection anymore. I perform from love. Love for the music, love for the people who believed in us, and love for the ones who reminded me who I really am. And when I look to my side and see Jimin there, smiling, alive, singing like his soul is on fire, I remember that the most beautiful moments in life aren't the ones that make the most noise. They're the ones that whisper, "You made it through. You're still here. You're still loved." I was wrong about Jimin. I thought his softness made him fragile. But now I know it's his softness that makes him unbreakable. And every time I see him, I'm reminded that being open, being kind, being real, that's what true strength looks like. That's what love looks like. So wherever you are, if you've been holding your emotions back, pretending you're fine when you're not, thinking you have to be tough all the time, let go. Let someone in. Let love find you again. Because the people who truly care about you, the ones who see you even when you're silent, they're the reason we become who we're meant to be. Jimin was that reason for me. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live the lesson he taught me. That love doesn't make you weak, it makes you real. There are moments in life when you think you've moved on, when you believe you've made peace with your past, your mistakes, your regrets. But then one quiet night, when the noise fades and you're left alone with your thoughts, something reminds you that healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering differently. That's what happened to me. I thought I had fully understood what Jimin meant to me, how he changed me, how he softened the hardest parts of my soul. But I was wrong again. There was still more to learn, more to face, more to accept about who I was before I truly saw him. It began on a night when everything felt heavy. We had just finished a massive concert, lights, screams, cameras, everything you'd expect. Everyone was celebrating, and I was supposed to be happy too. But inside, I felt disconnected. I didn't know why. I went back to my hotel room, turned off the lights, and sat by the window. The city below was alive. Neon lights flashing, cars honking, people laughing, but I felt like I was watching life through glass. And then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Jimin. Just 2 words. You okay? That question did something to me. Because even through the noise, through the distance, he still noticed. He always does. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. I typed, yeah, but then deleted it. I didn't want to lie. I didn't know what to say, so I put the phone down. A few minutes later, another message came through. I'm here if you need me. Simple, no pressure, just presence. That's who he is. That's how he loves. The next morning, I found him in the breakfast room, sitting by himself. Earphones in, coffee untouched. I sat across from him without saying a word. He took one earbud out and smiled slightly. Didn't sleep much? He asked. I shook my head. He nodded, as if he already knew. We sat in silence for a while, and then he said something I'll never forget. You know, sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing everything. It comes from letting yourself be human. That line hit me deeper than I expected. Because I had spent so many years trying to be more than human, perfect voice, perfect performance, perfect composure. I thought that's what people expected. But hearing those words from him made me realize that what people connect to isn't your perfection, it's your honesty. That day, I watched him carefully during rehearsal. The way he moved graceful yet raw. The way he laughed with Taehyung. The way he encouraged the younger staff. The way he picked himself up after a mistake without getting angry. There was this rhythm to his life, this trust in something beyond control. I envied it. He lived like he believed every moment. Even the hard ones had meaning. Later, when we were taking a break, I asked him, how do you stay so calm all the time? He looked surprised, then smiled. I'm not calm, he said. I just try to remember what matters. What does matter? I asked. He paused, thinking. Love, he said finally. Love in all its forms. Love for music, for people, for yourself. Everything else fades. I didn't say anything, but inside I felt something shift. Because I realized that all the times I had been chasing success, chasing recognition, chasing perfection, I had been missing the one thing that made all of it worth it. Love, not the romantic kind, but the kind that anchors you when the world spins too fast. The kind that Jimin gives without asking for anything back. That night, I wrote in my notebook, love isn't what fills the emptiness. It's what makes you brave enough to face it. Weeks passed, and we went back to Korea. Life returned to its rhythm, schedules, rehearsals, recordings. But something in me was different. I started showing up differently. When Hoseok cracked a joke, I laughed without holding back. When Namjoon looked stressed, I stayed to help him talk through it. When Taehyung got quiet, I made sure he knew I noticed. I started caring out loud the way Jimin always had. One evening, we were all in the studio working on a song. It was one of those nights where nothing felt right, the melody wasn't landing, the lyrics weren't flowing, everyone was frustrated, the air was tense. Then Jimin spoke up softly. Let's take 5. No one argued. He walked over to the piano and started playing something gentle, something that didn't belong to any of our songs. Just simple chords, slow and calm. Without thinking, I started humming along. Then Hoseok joined, then Taehyung. Within minutes, the tension broke. The room filled with warmth again. When we finished, Jimin laughed. See, sometimes you just need to breathe. That moment stuck with me because it wasn't about the song. It was about harmony, the kind that happens not when everyone's perfect, but when everyone's present. Jimin reminded me that life is the same. Harmony isn't the absence of mistakes. It's the grace to keep creating together anyway. Later that night, after everyone left, I stayed in the studio with him. The room was quiet, just the hum of the city outside. I looked at him and said, "You really are the heart of this group, you know?" He shook his head immediately. "No," he said softly. "We're all the heart, just beating in different rhythms." I didn't argue, but I smiled. Because deep down, I knew he was the rhythm that kept us all in sync. As the weeks went on, I started noticing how that lesson extended beyond music. Every conversation, every shared meal, every laugh, it all mattered. And when I started to slow down enough to notice, the world seemed to expand. It's like I've been walking around with my eyes half closed, and suddenly everything was brighter. One night, I was talking to Namjoon about it. I told him how Jimin had been teaching me things without even trying. Namjoon smiled knowingly. "That's what love does," he said. "It doesn't lecture you. It transforms you." That sentence stayed with me because transformation doesn't always look like fireworks or breakthroughs. Sometimes it's just a quiet shift in how you see the world. And for me, that shift was Jimin. Now, every time I see him laughing with Hoseok, comforting Taehyung, teasing Seokjin, or sitting quietly with Yoongi, I feel this deep gratitude. Gratitude for the way he lives, for the way he reminds me of what truly matters. I used to think life was about achieving, about proving myself, but now I know it's about connection. It's about moments like these where you're fully present, where your heart is open, where you feel seen without having to perform. And when I think of Jimin, that's what I see: a life lived with an open heart. If you're listening to this, maybe you have someone like that too. Someone who teaches you, not through words, but through who they are. Don't take them for granted. Let them know they matter. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive with a grand entrance. It's been sitting beside you the whole time, waiting for you to note it. I was wrong about Jimin. I thought his kindness was simple, but it's not. It's sacred. It's the kind of love that doesn't demand attention but changes everything it touches. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to that kind of love. Quiet, steady, and endlessly real. You said 7. ChatGPT said, "Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below." I think there's a part of growing up that no one really prepares you for the moment when you start realizing that love and understanding aren't things people owe you. They're gifts. And sometimes you only understand their worth when it's almost too late. For a long time, I thought love meant protection, building walls around yourself so you wouldn't get hurt. But then someone like Jimin comes into your life, and suddenly you realize that maybe love isn't about protection at all. Maybe it's about letting yourself be seen completely, even when you're not at your best. After we came back from tour, things slowed down. Everyone started working on their own projects. The group chat was still alive, full of memes and check-ins, but it wasn't the same as seeing each other every day. For the first time in years, I had space. Space to think, to feel, to breathe. And that space brought with it a kind of silence I wasn't used to. You see, when you've lived surrounded by noise, music, laughter, fans, interviews, that quiet can feel almost unbearable. One night, I was sitting alone in my apartment, scrolling through old videos. There was one clip from years ago, us in the practice room, sweaty, exhausted, but laughing uncontrollably because Jimin had tripped and somehow turned it into part of the choreography. I must have watched it 10 times. Not because it was funny, but because I missed that feeling, the pure, unfiltered joy of being together without pressure, without expectation. That night, for the first time in a while, I texted him. Just 2 words. You up? He replied almost instantly. Always. We ended up talking for hours. Not about work, not about plans, just about life. About what scared us, what we miss, what we hope for. At one point, I told him I've been feeling lost lately, like no matter what I achieved, it never felt enough. He listened quietly and then said, that's because you're chasing peace in places that can't give it to you. I asked him what he meant. He said, you think peace comes after you finish something, after a concert, after an album, after you prove something. But peace isn't waiting for you at the end of the road. It's with you every step if you let it be. That line broke something open in me, because I realized how much of my life had been spent in pursuit. I kept thinking, once I do this, I'll finally feel enough. But that feeling never came, because I was measuring my worth by what I could do, not who I was becoming. And Jimin, he saw that long before I did. A few days later, we met up at this little cafe near the Han River. No fans, no cameras, just 2 people who've been through everything together. We ordered coffee, sat by the window, and talked like it was years ago again. At one point, I asked him, do you ever get tired of carrying everyone's emotions? You're always the one listening, the one caring, the one holding it all together. He smiled faintly, stirring his coffee. Sometimes, he said, but I've learned that love doesn't mean fixing people. It just means being there. That's enough. I looked at him for a long moment. You really believe that? He nodded. Yeah, because I've had people who were just there for me when I couldn't stand myself. That's what saved me. That's what love is. That silence after he said it, it wasn't empty. It was sacred. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. All those times Jimin had been there for me quietly, patiently. It wasn't out of obligation. It was out of love. The kind that doesn't expect anything back. The kind that just exists. After that day, I started noticing the ways love shows up quietly in our lives. It's in Yoongi showing up to the studio just to sit in the corner while you record, not saying much, but letting you know you're not alone. It's in Seokjin bringing snacks during late rehearsals, pretending it's no big deal. It's in Hoseok cheering for everyone louder than he does for himself. It's in Namjoon sending random philosophical texts that somehow always arrive when you need them most. It's in Taehyung looking at you during concerts and smiling like he's reminding you to breathe. And of course, it's in Jimin, always. Jimin who listens without judgment, forgives without conditions, and loves without boundaries. One evening, I called him after a long day. You ever think about how weird this all is, I asked? Like how our lives turned into something we never could have planned? He laughed softly, all the time. Then he said, but maybe that's the point. You can't plan love. You can only notice it. That sentence has stayed with me ever since. Because he's right. Love isn't something you build like a schedule or control, like a song mix. It's something you notice. It's already there. In the small gestures, the shared silences, the look that says, I understand. A few weeks later, I went to visit my parents. It had been too long. My mom made my favorite food. My dad asked the usual questions about work. And for once, I didn't rush the moment. I sat there, really there, and realized how much love had been surrounding me my whole life, even when I was too busy to see it. And when I got back home that night, I texted Jimin again. You were right. Peace isn't out there. It's right here. He replied with just a smile emoji and the words, told you. That's the thing about Jimin. He never tries to prove he's right. He just lives the truth until you see it for yourself. Since then, I've been learning to live slower, to breathe before reacting, to say thank you more, to forgive faster, to look people in the eye when I say, I'm proud of you. Because love isn't just about grand declarations. It's about the small, consistent choices that make people feel seen. There was this moment during one of our last rehearsals together before a big show. Everyone was stressed. Tension was high. I was getting frustrated, overthinking every move. Jimin came over, rested a hand on my shoulder, and said, "Hey, don't lose yourself in trying to be perfect. Just be real. That's the version people love." And that's when I finally understood what he'd been teaching me all along. Love doesn't demand perfection. It invites presence. Now, whenever I think about Jimin, I think about that kind of love, the love that sees you even when you're hiding, that reminds you who you are when you forget, that shows up quietly when the world is loud. I used to believe being strong meant being alone, but now I know the truth. Being strong means letting love in. So if you're listening to this, maybe there's someone in your life you've been keeping at a distance, someone who's been trying to love you in their own quiet way. Let them see you. Let them stay. Because the people who love us through our silence are the ones who remind us we were never alone. I was wrong about Jimin. I thought I needed to guard my heart to survive. But it turns out he was the reason I learned how to live. You said, ChatGPT said, "Hey everyone, this is Jungkook. Before we start, I want to know where you're listening from. Drop your country in the comments below." There's something about growing older that makes you revisit the things you thought you already understood. You look back at moments that once seemed small and realize they were everything. You remember words that didn't mean much at the time, but now carry the weight of a lifetime. For me, that realization keeps circling back to one person, Jimin. Every time I think I've learned all there is to learn about what he meant to me, something happens that proves there's still another layer, another quiet truth waiting to reveal itself. It happened one evening when we were all together again after months of working on solo projects. It had been a long time since all 7 of us sat in one room. No cameras, no schedule, no pressure, just us BTS. But more than that, brothers, we were at Yoongi's place, eating takeout, laughing about old stories, teasing each other the way we used to. But underneath the laughter, there was something deeper, a kind of nostalgia that felt almost holy. At one point, Jimin started talking about the early days, the hunger, the fear, the uncertainty. He said, "You know, I miss those times. Not the struggle, but the closeness. Back then, it felt like we were holding each other up just to survive." Everyone went quiet because he was right. We all missed it, that innocent kind of togetherness before the world got too big. Then Jimin looked at me and said softly, "You used to stay up later than everyone. I walked past the practice room at 2 in the morning and hear you still singing." I smiled. "Yeah, I didn't know how to stop back then." He nodded. "You still don't." Everyone laughed, but he wasn't teasing. He was telling the truth. That conversation stayed in my head for days. Because he was right. I didn't know how to stop. Not from work, not from perfection, not from the constant need to prove something. But for the first time, I wondered what it would mean to rest. To let go without feeling like I was losing myself. A week later, I invited Jimin to come with me to Busan for a short break. Just a few days, no schedule, no cameras. He agreed instantly, like he'd been waiting for the invitation. When we got there, it felt strange at first, being still, being anonymous. But on the second evening, we sat by the water, just watching the waves roll in. The air smelled like salt and memory. The sun was dipping low, painting everything gold. After a long silence, Jimin said, "You ever notice how the ocean never stops moving, but it's never rushing either?" I turned to look at him, and he continued, "It's patient. It takes its time. It knows where it's going." I didn't respond, but something in those words sank deep into me, because that was Jimin, steady, patient, constant. He didn't force growth. He allowed it. He didn't chase love. He became it. And in that moment, I realized how different we were. I was the wave crashing, and he was the tide that kept coming back. That night, we walked along the beach barefoot, the sand cool under our feet. Jimin talked about how he'd been journaling lately, trying to write down things he's grateful for. "It helps," he said. "When I feel lost, I look at that list, and I remember what still matters." I asked him what was on it. He smiled. "Moments like this." It hit me hard because that's what I never learned to do. to pause long enough to notice what mattered while it was still happening. I was always looking ahead, the next show, the next song, the next goal. But Jimin lived differently. He lived now. And I realized that maybe that's why I always felt so grounded when he was around. He was a living reminder to stop running. Later, as we sat by a small bonfire, he said something that still echoes in my heart. You know, I used to think being strong meant keeping everything inside. But now, I think real strength is letting yourself be soft, even when it scares you. I didn't say it then, but that was exactly what he had been teaching me all along. To be soft, to stay open, to trust that love doesn't disappear just because life gets hard. The next morning, before we left, we walked to a small cafe near the shore. The owner recognized us, but instead of asking for photos, he just smiled and said, "It's good to see you two here." We talked for a while about how time changes everything, how fame can make life loud, but love keeps it human. When we left, Jimin looked thoughtful. "You ever wonder what it would be like if we weren't famous?" he asked. I laughed. "All the time." He nodded. "I think we'd still find each other.